rights, responsibilities, and all those things, and it will relate to both of you. And then we will ask you to, Ms. Makuse, the oath, and Mr. Pamodi, the affirmation separately. Is that okay? So, Ms. Makuse and Mr. Pamodi, please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all the questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry. Notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a House or committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. Starting with you, Ms. Makuse, please repeat after me, because I, as I indicated, am informed you're going to take the oath. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
will be the truth,
will be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Pamodi,
Yes, Chair.
I solemnly and sincerely declare
I solemnly and sincerely declare
and affirm
and affirm
that the evidence
that the evidence
I shall give
will be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
I so affirm.
I so affirm.
Thank you very much, Advocate. You've got 20 minutes.
Ms. Makuse and Mr. Pamodi, you have exactly just under 20 minutes to finish your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable members, I thank you all for inviting us here today. My name is Dudwetsang Makuse, and I'm the incoming National Coordinator for the SOSCoalition. I'm not going to spend too much time on a lot of the issues that have been discussed here, but I will spend time on the editorial policies, which is for us an ongoing matter, and some of the our public engagements during the period of the SABC crisis. I will then hand over to my colleague, who will take you through details of the multi-choice court case, the broadcasting bill, and the MOI. So SOS is a membership-based broadcasting network. We represent a broad spectrum of civil society stakeholders who are committed to public broadcasting in the public interest. Our membership includes trade union federations, independent unions such as the Broadcasting, Electronic Media and Allied Workers Union, as well as the Media Workers Association of South Africa. Independent film and production sector organizations such as the IPO, SASFED, as well as our civil partners who are Freedom of Expression Institute, Media Monitoring Africa, Right to Know, and Section 27, and many others which I cannot name right now. At the outset, in 2008, SOSCoalition adopted a specific focus on the institution of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. So essentially our core work and most of our engagements center around the SABC, any challenges that it faces, we monitor it and we seek to resolve those in whatever processes and methods are made available to us. One of the biggest engagements of the year has been the case that the complaint we launched with ICASA regarding the editorial policies, which then infamously got known as the protest ban. As we all know, ICASA ruled favorably, and the SABC was directed to withdraw those policies. Furthermore to that, the coalition has been in a process of taking that case forward by, so as to ensure really that in future, any other board or any other member of the SABC is not able to pass through directives and change policies without following due process, because this is what we believe was another aspect of the editorial policies case that was overlooked. And a key aspect of that was, the importance of that really was that it's enshrined in the Broadcasting Act in Section 6, and when the board did not follow due process by inviting the public to comment, especially at the draft phase, so close to finalization of those policies, it was in contravention of Section 6. We also are of the opinion that because the SAB itself has policies that dictate that editorial policies or indeed any other policies should be reviewed within a certain time frame, the SABC board did not follow its own internal mechanisms and thus only changed the policies at a later stage. For us, it's really important that the SABC follows these processes, not because we are trying to be bureaucratic, but simply because it allows for a diverse, wide range of views to be incorporated into the final product. Ultimately, the SABC belongs to the people of South Africa, and indeed this is espoused in the Broadcasting Act. And considering that 7 million of the 12 million TV-owning households in this country rely solely on the SABC for their information needs, it becomes even more important that when we see changes that affect the content that people are going to be viewing, that affect the way in which journalists practice and do their work, that affect the ways in which interviews are held, what obligations media workers have and what they don't have, then surely we want to make sure that due process is followed to make sure that in the end, those who need to be held accountable, should there be any issues that arise, are held accountable. So while we were engrossed in the initial ICASA case, which was about the protest ban, the violent protest ban, our colleagues at R2K were also preparing and making their own interventions. It was during that time that we were then invited by the so-called SABC 8, following their dismissals, to support them both strategically and in other ways that we could as civil society organizations in the actions that then ensued on the 1st of July. That period really for us became known as the SABC crisis, and that was the tipping point. The 1st of July engagements were called Black Friday. If you know anything about media history in South Africa, you'll know that Black Friday is about the 1976 bannings of journalists and publications by the erstwhile apartheid government. So it was symbolic for us to use that as a way to show people about where we were coming from, and so as to also remind people not to repeat the mistakes of the past. But most importantly, for us, it was about supporting a worker-led movement that sought to bring to the fore worker challenges that were being faced inside the SABC by media workers, and I think also in other organizations, which obviously we don't really know about right now. On the day of the protest, as my colleague earlier mentioned, a delegation of leaders was invited to speak to Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng. However, that did not happen as immediately as it should have, first of all. And secondly, we also found out that my colleague was deemed persona non grata. So after a long delay of not being able to enter the premises, he was eventually let in. There was a discussion that ensued, and the following Monday, having committed to the delegation that he would engage with them further, Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng did not show up. We, of course, have all the events, the recordings of those events and that entire day's proceedings on tape. But to really get to some of the things that happened following that time, after a broader public mandate was sought from other stakeholders as well, who are not necessarily media-related civil organizations, but simply members of the public, as well as other NGOs who are concerned with different other issues, who basically decided that they too wanted to be part of making sure that whatever was happening at the SABC was brought to a halt. And during those times, there was also an instance where some of our pickets were interrupted by protesters who claimed to be supporting Mr. Motsoeneng. And although there was nothing violent that occurred, thankfully, we did come to realize that there was a lot of misinformation going around that we could not really trace where it was coming from. And most of it had to do with the local content policy. And I think I'll use the moment to actually state that the SOS, alongside SASFED and other bodies, has campaigned from 2010 until 2014 for an increase in local content, and actually won a rise to 70% of local content broadcasting in the SABC. So part of that was a regulation that required the SABC to source local content from underrepresented communities. In conclusion, so that I can actually give my colleague a chance to get into the nuttier details of also our legal work and more strategic interventions, I wish to really just state that when the SABC was born, when the SOSCoalition was born, we were called the Save Our SABC Coalition. And for us, the events of this year, getting involved in making sure that the editorial policies were revised and the continuing work that we are doing around that and other cases, was just a tipping point of a crisis that we had identified over a decade ago. It was also a true demonstration to us and really to the South African public that there is an active, real-life constituency all over the country of citizens who are concerned about the SABC and are concerned about how they receive information, how they are being engaged, and how they get to participate in public processes. And I think we should always remember when we are engaging in these processes, especially for people who try to make allegations that media freedom issues are the domain of intellectuals or the domain of the middle class or anybody else. You know, the events of July 2016, at least to SOS, were an indication that we certainly have a mass-based support of people who are coming from a variety of communities who are very much aware of the linkages between media, public broadcasting, different corporations, different types of media entities, and the ways in which that informs their ability to participate in our democracy. So I really do hope that as this inquiry proceeds and as once it ends, that we will really step into a space where we can start looking into fixing the SABC, not in an interim way, but in a more meaningful and sustained way, because I think that's what's expected of us by the citizens of this country. Thank you.
Ha ke qale ka ho dumedisa modulasetulo ya Kgabane mmoho le lona baemedi ba rona ba Kgabane ka hore mema monana re tlo buisana ka lentswe le seipone sa setjhaba se re se hlokang. I will really only touch on 3 major issues in my presentation, and I will ask that the Honourable Committee forgive me as I've added additional information within my presentation, which we will make available to you. I'll maybe start with unlawful conduct by and or without the intervention of the SABC board, given the fact that the terms of reference of this committee's work is to assess and establish the capacity of the board to function, whether or not it only has one sole member standing. The first, as my colleague has already outlined, is about the SABC's editorial policies and the manner in which they were revised, which in our view is unlawful and for which we have laid a complaint with the ICASA's CCC. Section 6.6 of the Broadcasting Act explicitly requires the SABC board to ensure that there is a public participation in the development of the editorial policies by inviting and considering public comment on such policies and by other means. This language is peremptory and it's quite specific. It does not say that these, the public must be engaged and or by other means, engaged through public comment on a draft or through other means, but rather that it must happen through public comment on a draft set of policies as well as by other means. In our papers, which we have made available to this honourable committee, we outlined the sequence of events around how the SABC ended up revising its policies in an unlawful manner. The key issue here is that in collusion with the Minister of Communications, and we must be frank here, the SABC's board failed to undertake a draft comment process prior to adopting and revising these policies as is required in law, but further went the step of misrepresenting the fact that it had complied with the Broadcasting Act. And indeed, this is stated in a letter by the Minister of Communications, Bo Faith Mutambi, in a letter to the Honourable Van Dam on the basis of a written question to her, that the SABC complied with all requirements set out in the Broadcasting Act in respect of the revision of the editorial policies. Following from here, I'd like to also discuss the issue of the purging of staff. Our colleague and comrade from RTK earlier appraised this honourable committee of the issue of the purging of staff. And indeed, we've also seen extensive findings from the Public Protector's Office in her report, When Governance and Ethics Fail. This purging continues to happen in key strategic areas of the SABC. And indeed, we've heard this already from workers of the SABC who were before you yesterday and in other sessions before that. This purging also includes the purging of the SABC's machinery, including finance, procurement, commissioning, as well as the outgoing CEO of the SABC, Ndate Frans Matlala. We are yet to hear of any good reason as to why Mr. Matlala was removed from his position merely 4 months into his term of office, as well as the quantum of the golden handshake that he was paid out for the SABC's failure to allow him to see through his process, his service to the SABC. This is a critical issue that relates directly to the board as the body that Mr. Matlala, as the CEO of the corporation, accounts to. Linked to the purging of skilled staff at the SABC, we are also reliably informed by members of its staff about the extent to which there has been a breakdown of proper HR policies. Just yesterday, I received yet another call of an unhappy SABC worker pleading for us to represent this issue before this honourable committee. In addition to the brain drain that has been happening at the public public broadcaster, there have also been irregular appointments and rapid promotions of unsuitably qualified staff who have aligned themselves to Mr. Motsoeneng. While I cannot submit this information as evidence that is in my direct knowledge, it is important that it is heard and further investigated by this honourable committee. It behoves us to draw to the committee's attention to the findings of the Public Protector in this regard, pointing to the abuse and utter disregard of proper HR processes and policies in the appointment of and promotions of staff, most notably concerning the circumstances under which not only Mr. Motsoeneng, but Ms. Sally Motsoeneng, who was an appointment made directly by Mr. Motsoeneng, were appointed. There's also the issue of undue ministerial interference that precedes the current minister and goes as far back as the former minister, Ms. Dina Pule. The former minister's role in the irregular appointment of one Ms. Gugu Duda, the CFO of the SABC at that stage, who was subsequently removed from his position as not only a result of this irregularity, but also because of improper conduct around ensuring good financial controls within the SABC. Ms. Bule directly instructed the board to in fact, Ms. Pule rejected the board's recommendations as stated in the then Articles of Association of the SABC, where they run the recruitment process, undertake interviews, and present the minister with a list of candidates from which she may make her selection, her preferred selection. She returned the list that was presented by the then Ngubane board, demanding that Ms. Gugududa be appointed in this regard. Similarly so, we have also heard extensively of the current Minister of Communications' role in the irregular, irrational, and patently unlawful appointment of Mr. Motsoeneng. It is important that the Minister of Communications is held to account for these irregularities. Further to this, we have also heard of the development of the irregular development of the current MOI, which I must point out was in direct response to our court action, which is pending to be heard next year, around the lacuna in the Broadcasting Act, which was sought to be filled through this MOI around who is the appointing authority of the top 3 senior executives or the executive directors of the SABC. Again, we see a minister directly interfering and causing all sorts of machinations that are destructive to the SABC, as we have seen through the collapse of board after board after board as a result of this direct ministerial interference. We have engaged the Portfolio Committee on Communications on this matter repeatedly. We have sought for the Portfolio Committee on Communications, not only in this Parliament, but also in the 4th Parliament, to really attend to these matters because of the great concern that we have around them. And it saddens us to say that they have failed us. We have written repeatedly. We have engaged with various members of the Portfolio Committee on Communications, outlining our concerns. We have petitioned repeatedly, and there has been no adequate response in this regard. And it is important for this committee to engage with members of the Portfolio Committee on Communications as to why it was that they failed to arrest this problem when it was only just emerging as far back as 2013. But at this stage, I will...
You've got 5 minutes. No, you can carry on for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. It also has been raised, the issue of the introduction of this new Broadcasting Amendment Act has also been raised, bill has been raised. This bill seeks to exclude Parliament's role as our representatives in the legislature and in government to make the recommendation to the appointing authority, which is the President, around the appointment of board members. It is well known that the politicization of the board appointment process has been central to the instability that we have seen in the SABC's successive boards over at least the last 10 years. Unfortunately now, we see a minister who is seeking to seize power over the full set of the full management and governance of the SABC by seeking to vest herself as the appointing authority of the SABC's board, and further to that, setting up her own committee to run what is, to be frank, a bogus public participation process that is apparently independent around the appointment process. This is damaging, potentially damaging to the vitality of our constitutional democracy. As our colleagues from MMA have already stated, the SABC is a critical institution for the dissemination of information to the people of this country. As has been stated previously, over 24 million people rely on the SABC almost exclusively for their information needs. Unless we resolve the crisis that has been continuing for over a decade now inside of the SABC, and we ensure that we secure its independence, not for now, but over a sustained period, we will find ourselves in a situation where our broadcaster, our national public and not state broadcaster, is comparable to state broadcasters in our neighboring countries and other countries in the rest of the continent. It is important that we ensure the independence of our national public broadcaster, that we ensure that this crisis is arrested at this point, that there is a thorough overhaul of all governing legislation in order to ensure that we have an SABC that works and an SABC that works for the people of this country. I thank you.
No questions from me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mokoena. You got 3 minutes, sir? 3 minutes?
No. I will use my time. No, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you guys have raised this issue and it's come from you, because the issue of local content is something that we need to discuss. One, I'm glad that you've raised the issue that in the Broadcast Act, it is incumbent upon whoever develops the policy around local content, religious issues, and so on and so forth, needs to have public participation in order for them to amend such a thing. And that there was no such a process here in this particular case. Two, the issue of local content is an old issue. I was in the media business in 1996. I think I started in 93. And even then we were discussing local content. And there was a reason why we said 70-30 ratio, because you don't want to lock a nation out of an international experience. And what 90-10 does is that it does that. And also what it does, it locks out certain radio stations. But you know, the ratios, whether it's 90-10 or 70-30, these are issues that the industries should have engaged on. And I think Mr. Motsweneng and his policymakers would have come to a better conclusion had they allowed for public participation. It's not a question, but I will take your comment on it.
Let me suggest, because it's a comment and you're not going to have enough time to finish it in 5 minutes, just note that comment as the time arises. I'm hoping members will ask questions so that they have time to answer. Otherwise, we can just take your comments. But you'll have to factor it in. Unfortunately, I'm not going to compromise on time. Mr. Mahlangu.
Important things have been raised, and I think we're noting them. Now, the gentleman was actually also going to talk about the multi-choice. And I would want him to actually speak on the multi-choice, because I think it's a crucial matter. So I give him my 3 minutes for the multi-choice, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Mahlangu, for the opportunity. The multi-choice deal, we need to look at the chronology. In 2008, we have the Broadcasting Digital Migration Policy, which was developed and gazetted by the late Minister Ivy Matsipa-Kasaburi. Within it, it provides for a robust set-top box control system within government-manufactured and provided set-top boxes in order to, one, stimulate the electronic manufacturing sector in this country in order to become a supplier to the rest of the continent, because the migration process was not only unique to ourselves, but to the rest of the continent and indeed the world. In 2013, along the way, in 2012, we have an amendment that is made by former Minister Dina Bule, which is really the most notable one, where it goes further to clarify these issues around encryption policy, encryption, and why we need it in this country, amongst others. In 2013, MultiChoice begins to engage with the SABC through one Mr. Hlaudi Motsweneng around this issue. Presumably, the board had knowledge of this, and I do implore this committee to engage with Dr. Ben Ngubane on this matter so that he too may really give a full picture of how this deal was negotiated. The deal, the essence of the deal was really to secure MultiChoice's dominance as the monopoly player effectively within the subscription broadcasting sector, because one needs an encrypted signal which is scrambled and fuzzed up in order to be able to access international premium content, including football, as well as the big dramas and documentaries and series that are watched internationally and loved by people, both abroad as well as here at home. And then it would go into a set-top box. In this case, it would be the DSTV set-top box or the Mnet decoder, at which point then it would be unscrambled and available to be watched by the paying viewer. Similarly, for the SABC, the deal, or rather not similarly, but on the other side for the SABC, the deal would ensure that the SABC remains the dominant free-to-air broadcaster within the free-to-air market. Now, we do need to...
Mr. Makusa, you're going to have to put it on pause. Unfortunately, you'll have to put it on pause. I'm sure somebody, I certainly will give you my time to complete it. But I don't know, I don't want to, unless members say that we must allow him, I don't know how you want to handle this one, because we are not allowing them to answer. We're just asking and making comments. Can we ask either pointed questions or we allow them to respond?
Thank you, and thank you. Maybe you can submit written additional documentation, I think, to set out some of the issues that there isn't obviously time, because I'm very interested on the fiscal position of the SABC. If you can give us a written document on that, in particular, the proposal you say on the very recent move where Mr. Motsoeneng has proposed all contract staff to be given new 5-year contracts. That information, what is the fiscal implications of that? Secondly, the issue of National Treasury, when they had the investigation on the guarantee, and it seems that nothing further came of that after Mr. Matlara left with what appears to be a golden handshake. If you could give us a written submission on that. And then lastly, maybe you can just respond in 1 minute. The current case that you're involved in the Competition Commission. We've had a brief on that already, on the multi-choice deal. But the lacuna in the Broadcasting Act, that aspect, when is that being heard, and does it appear to you that there is a lacuna? Under our impression, we thought it was very clear that Parliament is the appointing authority, and the authority, the President fires members of the board. Thank you.
If I may have clarity, Chair, what are the specific questions that the Honourable Swart would like answers to right now?
On the court case, I think on the Broadcasting Act in particular. Thank you.
So the lacuna in the Broadcasting Act is about who is the... I really just need to phrase this in my mind, my apologies, just so that it's clear and crisp. It is about who is the appointing authority as regards the executive directors of the SABC. The issue here is that in order to have an independent broadcaster, public broadcaster that is accountable to the people of this country and not be beholden to a political authority such as a minister, even though they are in service of this nation, was to ensure that there is a Chinese wall between the executive of government and what is coming out of the national public broadcaster. Now, the Articles of Association were initially amended to incorporate a clause wherein the minister would be designated that appointing authority, which was a fundamental problem for us, which we sought to engage through Parliament and through direct engagement with successive ministers of communication. Unfortunately, that did not result in a positive outcome, which is why we have taken the matter to the High Court. We expect the matter to be heard in the early part of the second quarter of next year, as we have just requested a date from the Deputy Judge President, at which point then we will make that information available to you so that you too may be able to witness what is going on, participate and draw further information. But if you would like further information on this, our papers are published online on our website, SOSCoalition.org.za, where you may be able to find every single court action that we have litigated on in the service of the people of this country to protect the independence of our public broadcaster.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Koza?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you very much for a well-structured submission. I like the way you've kind of arranged your points. Man, I just need to find out something. The recommendations that you have, one of them is that we need to institute a forensic audit on Motsoeneng, on all the contracts that Motsoeneng did. Is it limited only to Motsoeneng, or would you rather we also look at the other aspects that may involve other parties at SABC beyond just Motsoeneng? Is it beyond Motsoeneng, or you are restricting it to Motsoeneng?
Thank you for this most important question, Honourable Khoza. A new part, in addition to my presentation, is that there has been a patent failure of the board to ensure that there are correct supply chain management policies in place and that they are complied with. And the Auditor General's Office did point to this fact, and that they were seeking to work with the SABC to address this matter, but the board and management have been dragging their feet.
Okay. No, I think that is fine. I just wanted to say, Chair, it's important because that's another aspect that I don't want people to lose sight of. The fact that the company secretary is very important in ensuring that SABC corporate governance is adhered to, you know. And again, I would request, Chair, that maybe they consider submitting another report to us on how best we can go about restoring governance at SABC, and also maybe highlight some of the points that you've made here, is that there have been successive board failure and sometimes outright refusal to implement the recommendations of the Special Investigations Unit. I, for one, I didn't know about that aspect, and it will be good if we can get the details of what were contained in that report, because going forward, they are going to be absolutely critical in redetermining the fiscal position of the SABC. Thank you.
Honourable Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome this report. I want to refer you to page 2, where you are reflecting on revision of policies. You are indicating the steps you have taken to an extent that you say you have submitted petitions to Parliament. When was this submission made so that we can check?
Thank you, Honourable Oliwe. I have been with the SOSCoalition since 2012, at which point I initiated the Parliamentary Engagement Programme, which is a key programme because this is where accountability ought to happen. We have made submission after submission after submission through the chair to members, pointing out issues that members in the Portfolio Committee on Communications ought to attend to. We have also done this in this current Parliament through the various chairs that have chaired that committee, and we had hoped that we would have had an inquiry as far back as 2014 with the dissolution of the Ngubane board, which did not happen, and we petitioned the Honourable Committee to consider and engage the matter of undertaking an inquiry such as this one in order to be able to arrest the problems. Unfortunately, this didn't happen until at this point, and we are most grateful for that.
Considering that you are saying the lifespan of a policy is 7 years, and the last revision or revision in goals was in 2009, it means we are back to that cycle now. I want to take you to bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your recommendations, where you are citing handshakes and also the revision of policies. Can you cite a few of the handshakes that were recently granted, and who then led to those, if you are aware?
I'll start with the most recent, which was the most recent that is in our attention, which was Mr. Frans Matlala's handshake, whose quantum is still undetermined at this stage. Prior to that, there was Mzulama Mokgobo's handshake. Prior to that, there was the handshake to Mr. Fulmolefe. The list goes on. And I can provide this honorable committee with an infographic which we have developed, which outlines all of the CEOs and senior executives inside of the SABC who have received golden handshakes and when that was.
I'd just like to extend my gratitude to yourselves and MMA and what was the other? And R2K for the great work you've done in ensuring accountability in this sector. I think the work of NGOs is often overlooked, so we're really grateful for your presentations. 2 quick questions. For the benefit of the people at home, you mentioned undue influence by the Minister of Communications. What is the Minister's powers in terms of the SABC? Where does she derive her powers? And then your recommendations, you recommend the suspension of James Aguma, the acting CEO and the CFO. Can you just elaborate why you think Mr. Aguma must also be suspended? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Van Dam. Firstly, the Minister of Communications derives her power from a combination of legislation. In the case of the public broadcaster, it would be the Electronic Communications Act, read together with the Broadcasting Act, which is the primary legislation governing the National Public Broadcaster, which supersedes the Companies Act in this case, as was rightly pointed out by the Parliamentary Legal Advisor who's sitting across from me over there, pointed out to the Portfolio Committee on Communications. The powers of the Minister in this regard are to ensure that there is full compliance with all legislation and policy and regulation governing this institution, as well as shaping and determining policy that may relate directly to the institution of public broadcasting in our country. It does not allow her to play a direct role in the management and operational affairs of the SABC. Unfortunately, her conduct has exceeded her powers, particularly around the forcing of appointments to the Ngubane board and then to the Chabalala board and then to the its continuation, which is the Magube board, in this case, around particularly Mr. Motsoeneng. So yes, in respect of Mr. Aguma, it is important to note that when Mr. Aguma joined the SABC as the CFO, he had been in another position prior to that. He too played a role as a director of the institution in allowing the corrosion of our national public broadcaster in this regard. In particular here, and this is not only related to Mr. Aguma, but to the whole, the board collectively viewed as is outlined in the Broadcasting Act, there has been a total bypassing of the SABC's commissioning protocol, which must be compatible with the Public Finance Management Act around the issue of awarding commissions. This is a supply chain issue. Commissions for programs. Uzalo is one example of an irregularly recommissioned program, and there are a number of others which have not yet been broadcast on the SABC. It is now only happening through unsolicited proposals that go directly to the 27th floor in Mr. Motsoeneng's office, where he still serves right now, even though he's been moved to he had been moved to corporate group executive of corporate affairs, and it's now called special projects, which raises further question for investigation.
Sir. Honourable Chauke.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me appreciate again the presentation. Very much encourage young, energetic presenters. I really want to applaud you. What is your understanding of the parliamentary process when it comes to a bill that is before Parliament? And therefore, in that, what is your participation in that process? And I just want to understand this court case vis-a-vis, if it's with regards to the bill in Parliament, it means that there will be an open process. Maybe just share that with us so that we have a full understanding.
We have engaged extensively through a number of legislative processes that have been run by Parliament. Currently, in respect of the SABC and the Broadcasting Amendment Bill that has been tabled by the Minister of Communications and is now in the committee's hands, has been that the committee has opened the process up for public comment, and yet we don't yet have a date at which comments must be handed in by. We are engaging with our constituencies and the broad public around what it is that they see and feel about these amendments and what it is that they want to be the outcome of this process, which views we then collate, put together in a submission insofar as they align with our values and principles entailed in our vision document, which you can also find on our website, which contains a series of specific recommendations for the SABC which you can engage with, after which then it goes back to Parliament for discussion, debate, after which then there will be an adoption of the bill or its outright rejection. So we are fairly well versed in the process.
I thank you very much, Honourable Killian.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you very much for your presentation. Unfortunately, I only saw it now because there was not a copy on my desk, but it's fine, I've scanned through it. All I wanted to ask you about, you're speaking of a lacuna in the Broadcasting Act. Now, I am a little concerned because if we look at the Act, it's actually a very well-balanced Act. And it was drafted during a period of people who were very clued up with constitutional values, Bill of Rights issues, the nature of the organ, you know, as you indicated, the public broadcaster versus a state broadcaster, because it must comply with the Constitution. Now, my concern is just, if you say we are not sure who is to appoint the executive directors, I thought there was absolutely no doubt, because for about 15 years, there were no doubts. It was only changed when the Memorandum of Incorporation was changed. Now, the issue here is, and that went along with the period of the removal of the board members. What is your take on the removal of the board members? Because if I read Section 8A, conversion, sub 5, it's very clear about the position of the Companies Act versus the Broadcasting Act. What is your view on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Killian. Speaking to the first question around the lacuna, our interpretation of the Act is the same as yours. It is patently clear that the board should be the appointing authority with no involvement of the minister. Unfortunately, because there is no explicit statement in the Act outlining that the board is the appointing authority, we find ourselves in this situation where there are contending interpretations for whatever reason. So, which is why we have taken this matter to court. On the matter of the board removals, particularly those relating to Messieurs Mavuso and Lubisi, as well as Mesdames Kalidas and the late Hope Zinde. These removals or these board purgings by the Minister of Communications in collusion with the board are patently unlawful. It is irregular that the board may be able to fire its own members when the Act is explicitly clear about the process of the removal of any board members, and to be specific, this ought to be done by the President and the President alone. Which is why we have also taken this matter to court, and it will be heard together with the issue of the MOI, because the issues are intimately related in terms of the governing
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. But do not despair. I'll give you my 3 minutes so you can continue. I hope I never intimidated you guys. Oh, thanks. Now, I'm hoping you've taken some notes. People spoke about, I'm talking about additional documentation, National Treasury, how far you are with that, the multi-choice if you want to add to that, forensic audit, is there limits, restoring good governance, what needs to be done, golden handshakes, if you could give us a comprehensive list to, as far as you know. And then, of course, public participation, local content, and those type of stories. If you could make that available to members of the committee, not to members of the committee, if you can make it available to the boss, not to members of the committee, we will incorporate that in our own deliberations. Thank you very much to both of you. As indicated, or as we always indicate. Is there anybody from the SABC that would want to challenge these things? No? As we've said to everybody else that appeared before us, thank you for coming. Our process doesn't end here. It will continue at least until the 28th of February, so feel free to share with us whatever it is that you want to share if you haven't shared it all with us now. And hopefully you're going to have a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. And we will adjourn and we will all be back here at 1:55. We